Lauro. Good afternoon, Secretary Lutnick. Last Tuesday, I had the chance to attend a breakfast for RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. It was their Congressional Day of Action. Survivors came to me, told me their horrific stories, and the survivors I spoke with had one message. They're seeking accountability and justice. After speaking with the survivors, I again went to the Department of Justice to review the unredacted Epstein files, to seek accountability and justice for the victims, the more than 1,000 victims and survivors. And today, Secretary Lutnick, I have some questions for you about what I saw. Let's start with your relationship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. In October, you told the New York Post with colorful narration that the last time you saw Jeffrey Epstein was in 2005 when you took a tour of his house, which happened to be right next door to yours. You claim you and your wife were so grossed out by this disgusting person, you swore you would never go back. But when the Epstein files came out, it turned out that was a lie. You were forced to admit that you had visited Epstein's private island in 2012, 4 years after Epstein pled guilty soliciting a minor for prostitution and was labeled a sex offender. You brought along your wife, your kids, your nannies to the predator's island. Incredibly poor judgment. But that even wasn't the whole truth. It turns out that 5 days after visiting his island, you and Epstein signed a business deal together as co-investors in a digital advertising company, Adfin. And emails showed you stayed in touch with Epstein about this deal as late as 2018. Secretary Lutnick, why did you lie to the New York Post about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, I did hear that. Please don't repeat your gracious offer to speak behind closed doors, not under oath, without the ability of this committee to question you. The American people wants to know, why did you lie about your relationship with Epstein?
The House Oversight Committee and I have agreed
we will
the appropriate time
reclaiming
together.
Representative Madeleine Dean has turned the congressional floor into a tribunal by unleashing undeniable ironclad evidence. We are about to witness the exposure of a filthy record that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was certain had been buried forever. This is absolutely not a routine political debate. It is a punitive strike aimed squarely at a secretary caught lying about his relationship with a sex abuse kingpin, alongside suspicions of letting his family siphon tax dollars from the poor to build a personal gold mine. Dean has all the confidential documents right in her hands. She takes direct aim at the October interview in the New York Post, where Lutnick blatantly fabricated that 2005 was the last time he saw Jeffrey Epstein, even putting on a show about how he and his wife were so grossed out that they swore to never see him again. However, the finishing blow was delivered straight from the unredacted original Epstein files. The naked truth is exposed. Lutnick not only stayed in touch, but also took his wife, children, and nanny straight to the predator's island of crime in 2012. It must be emphasized, this was a full 4 years after Epstein officially pled guilty to soliciting a minor for prostitution. Even more horrifying, just 5 days after that excursion, the two sides sealed a business deal at the company Adfin, and emails show they maintained an intimate correspondence until 2018.
And today, Secretary Lutnick, I have some questions for you about what I saw. Let's start with your relationship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. In October, you told the New York Post with colorful narration that the last time you saw Jeffrey Epstein was in 2005 when you took a tour of his house, which happened to be right next door to yours. You claim you and your wife were so grossed out by this disgusting person, you swore you would never go back. But when the Epstein files came out, it turned out that was a lie. You were forced to admit that you had visited Epstein's private island in 2012, 4 years after Epstein pled guilty soliciting a minor for prostitution and was labeled a sex offender. You brought along your wife, your kids, your nannies to the predator's island. Incredibly poor judgment. But that even wasn't the whole truth. It turns out that 5 days after visiting his island, you and Epstein signed a business deal together as co-investors in a digital advertising company, Adfin. And emails showed you stayed in touch with Epstein about this deal as late as 2018. Secretary Lutnick, Why did you lie to the New York Post about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, I did hear that. Please don't repeat your gracious offer to speak behind closed doors, not under oath, without the ability of this committee to question you. The American people wants to know, why did you lie about your relationship with Epstein?
The House Oversight Committee and I have agreed
We
that
are
we will
the
spend
appropriate
the time
reclaiming my
together.
time. I do not accept that answer. We've heard that one. We are our own committee. We have our own reason to test your credibility and veracity. Please answer the question. Why did you lie to the Post?
I have voluntarily agreed
Okay,
to spend the time and talk about it.
I reclaim the time. Let the record reflect you're dodging the question. The cover-up continues.
Dean delivered a devastating attack. She exposed Lutnick's media manipulation tactics, trying to create the facade of a moral gentleman who felt sickened by a sex offender. However, the unredacted documents ripped that mask right off. Not only did Lutnick fail to cut ties, but he also brought his entire family, his wife, young kids, and nanny, stepping onto the predator. Epps Island in 2012, a full 4 years after Epstein pled guilty in court. Ask yourself, who brings their own children right into the lair of a pedophile? Even more infuriatingly, a mere 5 days after the trip, they locked down a business deal and maintained close contact until 2018. This couldn't be a coincidence. This is proof of a deeply bound handshake in the dark.
You know what? In your conversations with the president, is the president concerned about your continued relationship that you had with Mr. Epstein as recently as 2018?
I am not going to discuss conversations I have with the president. That is not something I'm going to do.
Witness the moment a high-ranking official is completely silenced. This is truly a masterclass in dealing with those who stubbornly resist transparency. Lutnick cowardly tries to weave his way out by demanding to only answer in closed-door rooms, where there are no cameras and no need to testify under oath. He even drags out executive privilege as a shield to refuse mentioning the president. But Dean absolutely refuses to tolerate this charade. The ironclad declaration, "I reclaim the time," strikes down like a lightning bolt, smashing all evasiveness and nailing into the official record that the secretary is denying guilt and continuing to cover up the truth.
President Trump has just fired 3 cabinet secretaries, 3 women, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Lori Chavez-DeRemer. If President Trump has even a shred of concern about accountability for Jeffrey Epstein's enablers, he would fire you too. Beyond AdFin, what other financial ties do you have to Jeffrey Epstein?
As I said, I'm going to answer all these
Beyond AdFin, what other financial ties? You're the Commerce Secretary. We have a right to ask this question and get it answered.
Again, I'm not going to spend the budget day discussing something I've set aside time to spend on this topic.
Dean has laid bare the extreme double standards of the administration's machinery. They are ready to ruthlessly fire 3 female cabinet secretaries in the blink of an eye, yet they tolerate an individual stained by the Epstein network sitting comfortably in a seat of power at the Commerce Department. Lutnick desperately tries to pacify the severity of the hearing by using the excuse that it's budget day, attempting to conflate the narrative that questions about Epstein are off topic. But when the person manipulating the national economy has shady financial dealings with a human trafficker, that is the greatest security and moral risk of all, and this is the exact moment the facade of power collapses. Dean suddenly pivots from the deceptive Epstein scandal to a ruthless financial verdict striking straight at the taxpayers' wallets. The tariff policy scam.
I'm going to
With your
switch
House
topics.
colleagues.
Let me switch topics. A different and equally disturbing issue, how your family is profiting from your work as Commerce Secretary. Let's start with tariffs. You and the president illegally imposed the highest tariffs on the American people since the Great Depression. And your sons figured out how to profit from the high tariffs by buying up refund rights, pennies on the dollar, just as you were out there cheerleading the tariffs. As a result, federal taxpayers like my constituents may now owe your family tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars. I wonder if President Trump is concerned about you and your family profiteering off the illegal tariffs.
You know that that is false. Here's reporting. I'd like to put it in the record. Howard Lutnick's old firm did not, in fact, profit from Supreme Court tariff ruling.
Try to imagine the massive scale of corruption behind this story. A secretary using his seat of power to force tariff policies that strangle the economy and bleed the American people dry at the exact moment that chaos explodes. His own sons are secretly buying up refund rights at dirt-cheap prices, scheming to pocket hundreds of millions of dollars from the flesh and blood of the public. Surely you saw Lutnick's lightning-fast flip. When Epstein is mentioned, he stays silent and dodges the topic. But the second his family's $100 million cash cow is touched, he immediately panics, loses control, and frantically interrupts his opponent.
It is
It's
just
your
not
sons.
true.
It's your sons. The
No,
reporting
his
is
old firm and my sons. It is not
Mr. Chairman,
true.
reclaiming
And you
my
know
time.
it's not true.
I have
It's
asked
not true.
Mr. Chairman, reclaiming about 20 seconds. I hope you recognize how fundamentally wrong and corrupt this is. I hope you take accountability and have the decency to resign before you.
By fiercely pressing Lutnick to submit his resignation for his corruption and depravity, Dean is fighting hard to restore the rule of law against a machine that treats political seats like a family ATM, while simultaneously shielding Epstein's remnants. The truth here cannot be bent. Transparency will be strangled behind the closed doors that Lutnick is begging for. The government absolutely has no right to sell out justice to the elite, pillage the sweat and tears of the public, and trample on the ethics and safety of society. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Does a Commerce Secretary still have the right to hold office after fabricating a story to deceive the press about his family trip to Jeffrey Epstein's island? And does Lutnick's state of extreme panic when his son's secret tariff profiteering is unearthed make you lose all faith in the ruling system? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because once the shadow forces want to erase the tracks, our channel will expose these fatal pieces of evidence for you.
The fact that 8 U.S. senators, figures holding supreme legislative power, had their personal telecommunications data secretly extracted goes far beyond the scope of a standard political scandal. This is, in fact, a crisis centered around the limits of power and the separation of branches within the government. A federal executive agency did not hesitate to apply the most rigorous surveillance measures to interfere in the private lives of lawmakers, bypassing minimum transparency. More notably, this very massive and proactive apparatus suddenly turned into an evasive, passive entity when having to deal with the list of high-ranking figures linked to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal network. Today, we will dissect one of the landmark hearings regarding the transparency of the U.S. justice system. By erecting sharp legal barriers, Senator John Kennedy stripped bare the deep contradictions within the Department of Justice, DOJ, cornering Attorney General Pam Bondi into a dilemma. Opening the questioning, Senator Kennedy did not resort to direct accusations. He chose to force the Attorney General to personally reaffirm the strictest constitutional regulations regarding the subpoena issuance process, only to then expose the concessions made by tech conglomerates, big tech, in protecting user rights. Let's follow this airtight argumentative tactic.
And you would have to have cause.
I'm sorry, what do I have to show? What do
You
we
would
do?
have to have cause to get the
Good
subpoena.
cause or probable cause?
Probable cause.
Okay. Probable cause, or if it's a subpoena deuces taken, good cause, to show what?
You would need good cause for a subpoena duces tecum, and what you would have to show is that you believed a crime had been committed, or there was a possibility of a crime, or that could lead to other crimes. We
By the
frequently, in criminal enterprises, subpoena cell
By the
phones.
sitting United States Senator.
Senator, they would have to have believed you were part of a criminal conspiracy, is my understanding.
Would a judge have to sign off on it? On the subpoena?
Yes, Senator. Well, for a subpoena duces tecum, Jack Smith probably took it straight to the judge.
Now, the phone companies, particularly their general counsel, if they're worried about civil liability, even with a subpoena to get the phone records of a sitting United States Senator. Did I mention it was a sitting United States Senator?
Yes, Senator.
The general counsel for that phone company, let's say AT&T, they have the right to seek to quash that subpoena, don't they?
Phone companies frequently do that.
Yeah. And a smart general counsel for that phone company is going to call the sitting United States senator and say, would you like to weigh in on this? Would you like me to quash the subpoena? We're talking about invading someone's privacy here by a sitting United States senator. Could the general counsel for the phone company do that?
Well, Senator, if they believe that a crime could have been committed, they could not tip off the person who committed the crime. Again, I can't comment on details of this particular case.
I'm just asking you theoretically.
I've never seen you commit a crime, Senator Kennedy.
But let's suppose, okay, they didn't want to tip off the sitting United States senator. But the phone company and the general counsel for the phone company, or companies, if there were more than one involved, could say, you know, this is serious as an aneurysm. This is serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. This is a sitting United States senator. So general counsel would likely.
The dialogue sequence above is a prime example of constitutional law interpretation. Every telecommunications corporation maintains a large-scale legal team, and their lawful defense tool is the motion to quash face with the demand to provide the sensitive data of 8 senators, an event Kennedy deemed as serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. Professional ethics mandate that these lawyers activate this legal blocking mechanism. Despite this, the absolute compliance of these corporations in handing over all data has set an extremely risky legal precedent. When the private sector accepts backing down to the state unconditionally, the barrier protecting the privacy of ordinary citizens can also be considered completely collapsed. The existence of a democracy depends fundamentally on the principle of accountability. Whenever state agencies utilize intrusive power, they are obligated to maintain a transparent documentary system. Observe how the DOJ representative responds, along with the stern warning from Senator Kennedy regarding the impending legal consequences.
Now, do you have copies of the subpoena applications for these
Senator,
8?
Senator, I can't discuss anything regarding this.
You can't even tell me if you have copies?
I can't discuss any of this.
All right, when are you going to, General, when are you going to be able to discuss it?
I can't discuss whether there is or is not a pending investigation,
I understand,
Senator. This
but
was
let's
just
assume
brought to light
if
by
there is a
Director
pending
Epstein.
investigation, I don't want this to get swept under the rug, okay? Because I think you're going to get pushback from all quarters. I think the telecommunication companies are going to be all over you like a bad rash because they've got liability here for just turning over these records when they knew what was going on. I think some FBI agents may have some liability here. I think a special counsel might have some liability here.
The situation of citing investigative confidentiality to evade fundamental questions is an alarming phenomenon. Kennedy emphasized a crucial point. This act of concealing information does not stop at the boundaries of political morality. It also entails massive legal risks, liability for the telecommunication carriers, FBI agents, and even the special counsel. When a powerful institution refuses to publicize its own internal decisions, it is a sign that the agency is operating outside the framework of the law. Entering the second half of the hearing, Senator Kennedy executed a strategic pivot, unmasking the double standard in how the DOJ determines its investigative priorities. He reopened the files on Jeffrey Epstein's criminal network, presenting verbatim quotes from a cabinet-level witness, the sitting U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick.
Secretary Howard Lutnick on October 1 gave an interview to the New York Post about Mr. Epstein. And he described Mr. Epstein as, quote, the greatest blackmailer ever, close quote. Have you reviewed that transcript of that interview?
I have not reviewed the transcript, but I saw the clip of it.
Okay. It appears that Secretary Lutnick was Mr. Epstein's next-door neighbor. In fact, their townhomes shared a wall. And the reporter that was talking to Mr. Lutnick, she asked how other prominent men could have been associated with Epstein when Mr. Lutnick could immediately sense that he was a, quote, pervert. And then Secretary Lutnick said, or rather the reporter said, did they see it and ignore it? Do you remember that from the interview?
I do.
And Commerce Secretary Lutnick said, no, they participated. And then Commerce Secretary Lutnick goes on to say, quote, that's what his MO was. You know, get a massage, And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was a video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever, blackmailed people. That's how he had money, end quote. Is that true?
It must be reaffirmed. These are absolutely not baseless rumors. This is a public statement from a billionaire with direct access to the elite, someone who was once Epstein's next-door neighbor. When Mr. Lutnick asserts that prominent figures did not just condone but directly participated, only to be recorded as blackmail material, this constitutes extremely weighty legal witness testimony, demanding immediate action from the authorities. The foundation of investigative work is not to overlook any credible source of information. Even so, the DOJ's response to these systemic allegations showed an enormous disparity in standards. The final segment of this questioning is the verdict exposing the responsibility-dodging attitude of America's most powerful investigative agency.
Senators, our July memo said we did not uncover evidence. This case has gone through 3 administrations, as well as former U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta.
I know that, Pam. But have you interviewed Secretary Lutnick?
No, Senator.
Do you plan to?
If he wants to talk to the FBI or the FBI wants to talk to him, that is more than on.
Don't you think you ought to talk to him after this interview?
Senator, if Howard Lutnick wants to speak to the FBI and if Director Patel wants to speak to Howard Lutnick, absolutely.
This is an unjustifiable contradiction. The rationale that 3 administrations and hundreds of millions of budget dollars have been exhausted but found no evidence completely collapses when the FBI has not even once proactively approached to interview a crucial witness who is ready to provide information when handling internal political targets, such as extracting senatorial data. The Justice Department shows a fierce proactiveness in clearing all hurdles. However, when faced with a blackmail network linked to the upper class, this giant executive machine chooses a passive approach of waiting for the witness to come to them. This action does not reflect a weakness in professional capability, but rather a deliberate decision to turn a blind eye. Through the proceedings of this hearing, we have witnessed a fracture in the core values of American institutions. When privileged agencies can freely bend the rules to interfere with the data of lawmakers, while simultaneously exhibiting a cover-up attitude toward organized crimes at the highest levels, public trust in the justice system will undoubtedly be severely damaged. This incident poses an urgent demand for the creation of truly independent oversight mechanisms. Conducting a comprehensive audit of the DOJ's subpoena application process, coupled with the demand to declassify records related to the Epstein network, is not merely a legal requirement, but a mandatory foundation to restore the fairness of the entire system. How do you evaluate the inequality in law enforcement exposed in this hearing? Does the current system have the capacity to self-correct, or does America need a broad-based institutional overhaul? Please share your analytical views in the comment section below. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following our in-depth commentary bulletins. Goodbye, and see you next time.